Let's get started. This presentation is really about a major study that we concluded just a couple of weeks ago. So you're getting to see a presentation of key findings on the state of human-centric digital transformation happening in retail, banking, and healthcare. My name is Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and I'm president of SLD. We're a global brand consulting firm that specializes in helping banks through their transformational phases. So we get involved in everything from branch design to digital and app development to how to engage the customers and the employees to build that loyalty. And we've been in business 32 years. We have offices in New York, Toronto, and Shanghai. You know, there's a common theme through each of the presentations is the pandemic has had a significant impact in all of the various sectors. If anything, it's accelerated the need for consumers to move to digital platforms. But that's come at a cost of putting in question the relevancy of the built environments, the bricks and mortar channels. And we really wanted to take a look at what is the state of transformation happening in the banking industry. And this is the first of its kind study, and we'll explain to you why it's one first of its kind study. And it covers three major sectors. And why is this important to you if you're developing digital payment systems, or if you're a retailer on this presentation? It's because consumers come to retailers or banks or healthcare providers with what we call learned behavior that they've learned from other channels that they expect that given channel to deliver. If you think of, how come self-check-in kiosks have done so well at airports, is because we've trained them in the banking industry using ATMs. So you can see how transformation is happening in other channels has an impact on a specific industry. So our study covered 5 different sections: culture, leadership, digital experience, consumer experience, marketing capabilities, and workforce empowerment. So you can see that our study was pretty extensive. Within those 5 different categories, we actually evaluated 48 different initiatives across these categories to really understand where is the banking industry, or retail or healthcare, where do they stand in the initial planning stages, testing, initial deployment, and final deployment. And this is what we're going to share with you. And again, the full study is about 150 pages of key insights across the industries. The final report will be available 2 weeks from now. So please ensure that you connect with me on LinkedIn or through our business email so that you're on the list to receive the report. So the study, we looked at, as I mentioned, healthcare, retail, financial. Financial was 47% of the total sample. These are executives within the industry. We had 1,000 executives, 47% in banking, 37% in healthcare, and 16% in retail. We looked at the banking sector. We segmented the study based on number of employees, and you can see here we have fair representation across the various size of institutions. And then we have also fair representation across CEOs, C-suite versus senior and mid-management. And we want to find out what are the differences between the two. So what did we learn? Insight number 1 is similar challenges rank high, mostly human-based. So across the various industries, we noted that there are similar challenges across each one. So in the banking industry, not enough resources was number 1. Too many priorities was number 2. Need to provide ROI was number 3. And the fourth was lack of funding. And when I look now at the poll that we posted, we had 32 people responding. The number 1 issue in the poll was too many priorities. And that was followed by not enough resources, and technology is not integrated properly. And interesting, because when you look at other sectors, retail, their number 1 channel is struggling to formulate a plan. And then obviously the other 3 follow in line. When you look at healthcare, their biggest channel is not enough resources. But look at number 4, technology not properly integrated. So you can see, depending on the industry, the order or ranking of challenges that they face in transformation shifts. In some industries, we have unique challenges such as healthcare. And by the way, when you look at these three industries, healthcare is the least developed when it comes to transformation. There are significant laggers. Retail is number one, followed by banking very closely. Insight number two is different challenges face different levels of the organization. And this is probably one of the biggest insights, is there is a significant, and I'm talking significant lack of alignment on the priorities, the challenges, the risks, the opportunities of transformation between the C-suite and mid-level managers across every single point. So when you look at the C-suite, when you look at the challenges, their challenges providing an ROI is number one. Not enough resources and too many priorities is number three. But then when you go to management, number one is not enough resources. Number two is too many priorities. And number three is lack of funding. So you can see that although not enough resources is consistent across the two, you can see that the other two factors are very different between the C-suite management. And that really causes friction, misinformation. We presented this finding to one of our banking clients, and they indicated, yes, this is a common issue because the C-suite look at different priorities and they forget the initiatives that were actually underway are still in deployment, and that creates friction points. Insight number three is when we looked at, what is the approach in transformation? I'm going to pull up your poll. What we found out, quite startling for the banking industry, is being customer-centric is less so. Actually, the retail sector, being customer-centric was their number one approach to transformation, followed by a holistic approach. However, when you look at banking, fragmented approach with different programs by department was predominantly the transformation approach. And that makes sense when you look at the banking industry having to respond very quickly to fintech disruptive changes, the shift to digital banking, mobile banking. Obviously, they had to pivot very quickly. And each department had to react differently to the challenges. The second is led by one department integrated across the organization. Obviously, that typically is the digital division of the bank or the institution where they're driving the agenda. Creating a holistic experience across the enterprise was 23% and way down below customer-centric focus. And that's startling because when you look at the language that the banks are talking about as being more customer-centric, when you look at their behavior, unfortunately, they don't line up. We view that customer-centric is the future of transformation, and a lot of the banks are looking at how do they shift their transformation. A lot of them have come to maturity, and they are looking at more creating a holistic approach or being more customer-centric. Now, when we look at regional banks, and the study goes into, between C-suite and lower management, between small banks, you can see here that the 1,000 to 5,000 employees, which are the regional banks, creating a holistic enterprise program is the number one highest rank when it comes to the transformation approach. Now, when we look at the poll that you provided, customer-centric focus and creating a holistic and fragmented approach were the top three. Obviously, customer-centric being the number one. So you can see how that is very different than what we see here in the banking industry. Insight number four, humans are both an opportunity and a challenge. Let's talk about that. So when we ask the banks, not what about challenge, but what are the risks? What are the risks that are going to derail the transformation initiatives? Number one was digital solutions focused on tech and underserved the human experience, followed very closely by talent skill gaps. Obviously the shift to digital and mobile has put a real stress on the resources required for this transformation. With a lot of banks moving to Salesforce, there's created a vacuum in talent, accessibility to talent. Obviously, if you look at the challenge we talked about, they now appear in the risk, competing priorities, lack of clarity on problems to be solved, and adoption of sustainment, maintaining change momentum. So these are the big risks. And we have a breakout group at 1 o'clock that will be talking about these and how to create mitigating factors to help overcome them. Now, when you look at these based on the level of management, you can see here how different they are. For example, digital solutions focused on tech and underserved the human experience is number one for the C-suite, but talent and skill gaps is number one. Competing priorities between leadership groups is number one for the management. So you can see here that depending on the level of organization, there are different risks that they're concerned about. Insight number 5, the metrics measure success. We asked them, how do you measure success in your transformational program? And they're all about human factors: employee engagement, cost of operation, greater customer insights, improved location strategies, and brand NPS were all at top. We had something like 25 metrics. These are the ones that bubble to the top. And they're quite consistent across the management levels here, although there are sort of small variances. Improved location strategies, more important for C-suite versus lower management. Insight number 6, based on total sample, banks are falling behind in the transformation. So we asked, at the high level, when we looked at those 5 key buckets, we look at what those 5 key buckets. What's startling is the banks are slightly behind. That was startling for us because we thought the banking industry would be leading. Now, where the banking industry is leading is in what we call future-proofing transformation. So things like agile, nimble, they outrank the entire study, looking at new ways of delivering innovation, sales choreography. These are all things the banks are much more deployed and further along than the total sample. But when you look here, optimizing sales and marketing process, transforming the customer physical experience, transforming your customer digital experience, these are all initiatives the banks are leading, well developed in their transformational initiatives. I correct myself, are falling behind in their transformation initiatives. So you can see here, they're lagging slightly the total sample. When we look at the 48 initiatives, FI are progressing about half of these with clarity on goals and reasons, social marketing, move to the cloud, employee performance evaluations, role clarity and accountability being in the top percentage now. Again, these are important factors. When you're looking at this, the banks have really done a great job of marking themselves and improving operations in their banking facilities. Insight number 7, a high degree of transformation integration. Although the banks have been lagging the deployment of transformation initiatives, they've actually had on those initiatives they've done, they were far better integrated than the total sample. And you can see here the big buckets: product, digital, operations. You can see here they're further advanced in their integration versus the total sample. And again, when we look here at, we also asked the question, how integrated are you in your customer experience with your business model innovation and in your employee journey? And you can see here that they're extremely well developed compared to the total sample. So although they're lagging slightly the total sample on the initiatives or transformation, those elements that they are transforming are fully integrated within an organization. And this is a startling difference from retail and healthcare. We're almost close here to the insights. Insight number 8 is confidence level on succession high. So we asked them, how confident are you that your transformations will meet their goals? And resoundingly, they're high. But that level of confidence varies by management level. So the total sample was 47, FIs were 55, so you can see here significantly big. C-suites were significantly higher than the total sample at 59. But then when you look at management, there is a significant gap of 11% between C-suite management on the confidence level of the success of their transformation program. And that's a concerning factor. Although, overall, financial institutions are very clear, there is a significant gap on the clarity on what they're trying to achieve here. When you look at the total sample at 51, FIs were higher at 57. Obviously, C-suite were at 68%. But look at management, 47%. There's obviously here an issue of clarity between C-suite and management. And a lot of that can be attributed at changing priorities, which is a number one challenge, where C-suite are responding to maybe the stock market or competitive threat, where the management are still stuck in implementing previous initiatives and transformation that are either in the planning or initial deployment, but are not fully deployed. So we have these shifting priorities happening that are creating this lack of clarity. So I just want to summarize this in some key insights. One is the skill gap and linking technology to human needs are a big risk for the total sample and specifically for the banking industry. Path to transformation primarily focus on sales and marketing and digital physical experience. So there's a lot of other initiatives within our study that the banks are lagging or in initial stages. And that's concerning because that means that there's a lot of vulnerability in being disrupted by fintechs. Level of integration varies by management level. So we saw that in this study. There's a big gap of understanding between the levels of integration and levels of confidence, clarity, and actually on all the metrics. There's a lack of prioritization of plan and insufficient resource are the top challenges for the transformation. So, as we look at banks and having to respond to transformation, skill gaps, and by the way, the skill gaps is consistent across all three sectors we studied. It is a big issue across all three sectors. Leadership overconfident, lack of alignment. So there's a concern here internally. And as we know, transformation fails from the inside out, not from the outside in. And so if there's this lack of clarity and alignment, obviously that leads to friction points and confusion and vulnerabilities. And then obviously customer centricity is a gap in FI. Their focus has been a fragmented or siloed approach. And that really demonstrates the need to do a shift to becoming more customer centric. So what can banks do? Wrapping this up, process, move from a fragmented or department led to being much more customer centric. In the sense of future, the structure is focused on filling the talent, skills, and capability gap that will support momentum and transformation. One of the big concerns banks have, and actually across all three segments, is maintaining the momentum of transformation. Transformation typically takes 3 to 4 years, if not longer, to bring to life. And how do you keep that momentum when you have so many different shifting priorities and obviously market disruptions such as COVID? Then finally, in the message, reinforce a culture of transformation across the entire organization. Obviously, banks are much more further developed in being nimble and agile and embracing innovation, but they need to push that further so that they can maintain that momentum in the transformation initiatives. And that's going to wrap up. The opportunity really is to accelerate relevancy and growth of transformation within the banking industry. And I'm going to pause it here. I just end up, this is the collective that we have put together that Intel is a partner with to help you accelerate your transformation in your marketplace. And now I'll just wrap it up. And I'm just 2 minutes from the completion of this. If you have any questions, I'm just going to look here at questions, Q&A. There's 2 questions. First question, is there a big difference in response based on FSI, financial institution sizes? Absolutely, but only in certain sectors, like in the approach of transformation, the risks and the derailers, there is a shift there. But skill gaps remains consistent irrespective of the financial institutions. The other question is, when you look at the derails of transformation, what can you do to avoid them? We'll be talking a lot more about that in our work group at 1 o'clock. But as you can see, the number one is to ensure that technology aligns to the needs of the customer. So it's really is to ensure that the transformation shifts from being siloed or fragmented to being customer-centric. And that requires a rethinking of the role of technology, rethinking the role of the physical experience, the human experience, employees. That would be the number one. And number two is to ensure that the organization understands and has clarity on the need of transformation. Because without that clarity, people lose passion for those changes. They talk about the flavor of the month. Yeah, this is the CEO's flavor of the month. And when employees feel that way, they're not fully committed in the execution of the program, and those programs will lose steam. So thank you for those questions. I want to thank you very much for joining this presentation. Again, I'd sort of remind you, we have a working group at 1 o'clock. Anita from Bridger is speaking at Evolving These Insights and How Do You Humanize the Banking Experience. Please make sure that you see her presentation and participate in the panel that we have with some of our partners. I think you will find the insights extremely helpful. And by all means, finally, please connect with me on LinkedIn or on my email so that we can send you the full report. It's something that can help you either market your products more effectively or understand where the pitfalls within organizations on transformation. Again, I'm Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and thank you very much for your time.